Hello everyone, I'm Gus and this is Wiseguss Illustration. Get ready to keep learning about animation, more specifically animation in Procreate Dreams. However, remember that anything you learn here can be applied to any other animation software or even in hand-drawn animation. Today we're going to learn how to animate using frame by frame, in which we're going to hand-draw every picture that appears in the sequence. This animation is going to be simple, but it's going to be lots of fun. In today's video, we're going to animate a jellyfish. We're going to make it swim by making the tentacles going up and down. We're going to start by making a kind of storyboard of our animation. Right after the base pose of the jellyfish, we're going to make all its body shrink and become super flat. The idea is to make it very compact. In the next pose, we're going to elongate the jellyfish, making it propel upwards. Finally, we're going to make a similar movement to our base pose. It is going to be falling softly, so the tentacles are going to be bending upwards just a bit. In Procreate Dreams, I'm going to create a new project from the plus icon, and I'm going to create a square workspace. And I'm going to choose Draw. If you don't have Draw selected, you can choose it from the wiggly line icon. We slide down the timeline from this little line to access the flipbook, and it is here where I can do my frame by frame animation. After I draw my first picture, I'm going to the next frame. I'll make sure that onion skinning is turned on. In this case, everything that is before is going to be purple, and everything that is forward is going to be orange. You can edit this in different ways. In the beginning, I don't care about animating the tentacles. I just care about animating its veil. For a more accurate animation of the tentacles, I'm going to create some nodes that are going to make it easier to animate. For this movement, I'm going to make every node move upwards. This one will go here, this one will go here, this one will go here, and the same with all others. Then I will draw all the curves following those nodes. What I'm doing here is one of the bases of animation, what is called squash and stretch. It is going to squash to start the movement, and then it's going to stretch in order to make the biggest movement. Now we're going to create the in-betweening. Basically, in-betweening means drawing a movement in between other two movements. I start the movement with two keyframes. This means the first and final position. Then I create a frame between these two and draw a position in between these two. I can even add a position between the first frame and the frame in the middle. This is going to allow me to soften the movement, and we build the animation in a gradual way. I can also use this process to morph different shapes. My keyframes are a circle and a square. In a new frame, I draw the shape in the middle, which is going to be a shape between a circle and a square. In the frame in between the circle and this shape, I will create a shape that is going to be more a circle than a square. And finally, in the frame between the middle shape and the square, I will draw a shape that will be more a square than a circle. With more in-betweens, the movement is going to be softer and more fluid. Here you can see how in this new frame, we can see the before, that is in purple, and the forward movement, that is going to be in orange. In here we go from the base movement to the more squashed movement. I am pretty much going to draw in between all of the lines. We have to try to imagine where every line would go in between those. We want the movement to be very soft at the beginning, but then we want it to be more abrupt. To make a soft and fluid movement, we want to add more in-betweenings. We're going to create a transition movement. Basically, a transition movement is the one that is going to help me make a very fast movement with not too many frames. In this case, just one frame is going to make a big movement. I will basically draw the two positions happening at the same time. I'm going to join the previous movement with the next one. I can draw some split lines to complement the effect. Now is where nodes are going to be really useful. I look at the previous and the next node, and I will draw another node pretty much in between these two. Having the help of the nodes, we're going to have a more precise movement. Of course, there are simpler ways to do this process. For example, some programs like Adobe Animate, they can create the nodes for you, and the only thing you need to do is to move them to create the animation. So at least in this moment, in Procreate Dreams we have to do a more manual work. Now all the movements are ready, so it's time to give some color to our animation. I'm going to start with my background. I'm going to use dark colors to color the background because the jellyfish is in the bottom of the ocean. Besides, it is just an excuse to color the jellyfish with bright colors. I'm going to create a new track to color the background, and I will put this track in the bottom of the animation. I create a new track to color the top part of the jellyfish because I want my jellyfish to be mostly transparent. In this layer, I will color only the outline using an aquamarine color. I grouped all my sketch track and reduced its opacity. Now I can see my lines much better. I will draw my final lines over the sketch that I did previously. I have to do it over each one of them. This one, being a transition frame, is different from the others. So I'm going to draw the whole outline of the top part of the jellyfish. Up to this point, all of the top part of the jellyfish is going to be basically the same. Could it be different? Of course, yes. But to simplify the rest of the animation, I decided to use the same picture from the beginning. However, I wanted to create a small deformation after the big deformation it suffered. I just copied the picture from the beginning, and I used the transformation tools to make a very subtle transformation. Now, in a different track, I'm going to draw the tentacles. Each one will be drawn using just one line. To color the tentacles in the transition frame, I'm going to color all the space from the beginning of the movement to the end of the movement. Then I'm going to soften the end of the movement, and I'm going to erase some areas, and I'm going to create some speed lines. After this, again, in a separate track, I am going to color inside of the jellyfish in all the frames. After this, I'm going to use the Gaussian blur effect. Finally, I'm going to create some highlights to make the jellyfish look shiny. Possibly they're not 100% accurate, but they look good. I will organize the duration of some frames to emphasize some of the movements. Then I'm going to draw some bubbles that are going to help me show that the jellyfish is inside the water. I make sure the bubbles go from the previous movement to the new movement. As the bubbles get farther from the initial movement, they start becoming smaller. Now, in the transition movement, we suddenly see many bubbles going from the initial movement to the final movement, and the bubbles that were going up suddenly clash with this movement, creating a bubble chaos. Then, as the jellyfish goes up, we see how a small path of bubbles follow along, to then slowly fade into smaller bubbles. Finally, we see how the jellyfish floats down very softly and very slowly, so the tentacles go upwards and backwards a little bit. For this, I use the transformation tools. I create some bubbles on the jellyfish top to show the beginning and the end of the movement. Once the whole animation is complete, I'm going to group all the frames. I'm going to duplicate the animation and I'm going to organize it so the end movement from the previous sequence is going to be in the same place as the beginning of the new one. And I'm going to do the same until the end of the whole sequence. With this, I'm going to get the effect that the jellyfish is swimming upwards. Once I have all of this sequence creating the movement that I want, I'm going to group all of the sequences to have just one long sequence. Now I can play with my sequence. I'm going to select the whole group and I'm going to make my jellyfish smaller so it fits better inside the scene. I'm going to put it in the lower part of the scene to swim upwards. I can also copy this sequence to create more jellyfish. I'm going to make a bigger jellyfish to be swimming in front of this one. I'm going to use Gaussian blur to make it blurry. I'm going to create two smaller jellyfish that I'm going to be swimming farther away. I create other two jellyfish to be swimming farther away. I use Gaussian blur again to make them blurry. I use HSB to make them bluish, and I change the opacity to make them fade with the background. Finally, an underwater scene wouldn't be complete without bubbles, so I decided to create a few ones. Finally, I have to clarify that I messed up a little bit with the bubbles, and not the ones that are going to end up in the final sequence. What do you think of this animation? I hope you like this process, that you learned a lot, and that you can apply everything you learned here in your future animation. Remember, any question you have, any comment, anything you want to learn in the future, please let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, but most importantly, share it with somebody who can find this content useful. That is the best way to support the channel. It doesn't cost anything to you, but it's very important to me. See you in the next video. Adios.